Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are sure to introduce a wide variety of buffs to some older Pokemon. Whether these Pokemon are fan favorites, or just ones that have fallen off due to the general power creep, today I want to discuss the top 10 Pokemon I think deserve buffs in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Today's list is going to cover Pokemon already confirmed for Scarlet and Violet that I think in some way need to be improved upon for these games. If you enjoyed these top 10 videos leading up to Scarlet and Violet, make sure to leave a like on the video and use that subscribe button to stay up to date on future content like this. Before we begin though, head on over to Mystic Reads, where tomorrow the next edition of Yaju's Sign will be out. I wonder what Naruto and the gang will do next. Also, over on Mystic Umbreon Shorts, if we can hit 5k subscribers, I have a special top 5 series that I will be releasing specifically over there. So if that hypes you up, go ahead and drop a sub over there. Links will be in the description below and in the iCard above. Starting off with our number 10 Pokemon, we have Haunch Crow. Haunch Crow was missing during Sword and Shield, so I feel it's only right to spruce this Pokemon up a bit when returning to our next gen with a competitive format. Haunch Crow is going to have a lot working against it when it returns to competitive play. The lack of pursuit is going to be a massive detriment to it, as typically Haunch Crow would be a strong pursuit trapper in lower tiers to handle a team's opposing ghost types, and then gain Moxie boosts thanks to these easy KOs. Now, Haunch Crow lost its best way to guarantee it'll gain an attack boost with Moxie. Even without this nerf though, Haunch Crow already was in an awkward position as far as its stats go. Haunch Crow's speed of only base 71 is pretty lackluster, and even with Sucker Punch helping make up for this to some degree, Haunch Crow will still be a fairly slow option when utilizing any other moves. So how do we make Haunch Crow better going into Scarlet and Violet? The easiest way to make Haunch Crow become a threatening dark type again in competitive would be allowing it access to knockoff. If you think about any physically offensive dark type Pokemon in competitive, the first set that probably comes to your mind runs knockoff. While knockoff wouldn't replace the ease of boosting yourself with a combination of Moxie and pursuit, knockoff at least would provide a more generally supportive role to your other Pokemon. Removing the opponent's items would make Haunch Crow less reliant on needing to be a cleaner, but instead, it could try to remove the opponent's items such as leftovers or heavy-duty boots. If you paired Haunch Crow with a strong hazard option, you could pretty quickly wear through most teams thanks to its already strong offensive stats, as well as the opponents now losing their immunity to hazards. I think the only other thing Haunch Crow needs would be a small buff to its speed. If we gave it plus 20 in speed, it'd allow Haunch Crow to outpace Pokemon in the 80 to 90 range that it previously missed out on outspeeding. Continuing our trend of giving buffs to Pokemon previously missing from Sword and Shield, our number 9 entry is the original cactus Pokemon, Cacturne. Cacturne has a lot of tools that make it just barely miss out on being a strong Pokemon. Cacturne has priority in Sucker Punch, a strong 115 stat in both physical and special attack, set up to boost both these offenses, and even spikes for hazards. The one issue Cacturne has is an atrocious speed tier of base 55. There are certainly potent offensive Pokemon that can make a low speed stat work, but between the terrible defensive typing and the below average bulk, Cacturne's crippled by having only base 55 speed. If we were to make Cacturne viable, I think we'd have to outright double its speed. I know this may seem like a lot, but giving Cacturne 110 speed still actually only makes its base stat total 530, which is strong, but not too out there. With 110 speed, Cacturne will be able to actually survive as a potent offensive Pokemon, being able to outpace Pokemon such as Heatran that would otherwise previously give it an onslaught of issues. I think Cacturne would opt to typically run a mixed set with 4 attacks in order to not just limit itself to taking advantage of only one of its strong offenses. If it wasn't a Life Orb 4 attack set, some variation of Toy Scarf plus Switcheroo would also be fairly potent. You could give some sort of wall to your stabs of Forced Choice Scarf, which could be used in order to stop your opponent from getting a free setup turn, or even stopping your opponent from healing their Pokemon. Even without having knockoff, Cacturne would still find a way in order to become a strong offensive threat. and all we need to do is just double its base speed to 110. Our next Pokemon's an iconic Generation 1 staple, Golduck. Golduck's a Pokemon that has always been underwhelming since its inception. Its abilities are mostly reliant on weather, and there are typically stronger options to get past teams such as Kingdra or Seismitoad. Golduck also has the ability to utilize Cloud 9, which actually has given Golduck the title of the Primal Groudon Slayer. But you're going into a 5v6 bringing Golduck just for this role it may not even get to do because it's so bad at everything else in competitive. So how do we make Golduck a usable Pokemon? I think there's a couple ways to make Golduck more viable. We already had a couple of water and psychic types, but why wasn't Golduck also one of them? The first stage is literally called Psyduck, and this typing on a Rain Sweeper would make Golduck extremely unique. I think this would be enough to make Golduck stand out on Rain, but it also needs a little something for players who may not want to use Golduck on a weather team. One ability I actually noticed Radical Red used to buff this Pokemon was Neuroforce, which gives 1.25 times to super effective attacks. And I think this would be an amazing way to give Golduck some extra benefits. Golduck already has an incredible move pool offensively, with coverage such as Ice Beam and Focus Blast. I think Golduck would be a strong candidate for this ability on a Pokemon other than Ultra Necrozma. With these two buffs, Golduck would become a truly viable Pokemon going in the Scarlet and Violet. Continuing the trend of giving buffs to Weather Sweepers, there's a Hail Sweeper that has been fairly neglected competitively. Our number 7 Pokemon today is Beartick, one of the only Pokemon that can utilize 2 weathers to boost its speed thanks to both Swift Swim and Slush Rush. But despite this, Beartick is too slow to really be a threat, and a pure Ice-type Slush Rush Pokemon isn't great, especially when you realize every other Pokemon with Slush Rush also is a physical attacker. Arctozolt and Arctovish have their signature moves and typings that both benefit from Ice offensively. Alolan Sandslash has the ability to pressure fairy types, and Beartick is just left to always be the last choice. In order to fix this, I have 2 things I think will make Beartick a menace competitively, and also make Hail finally a truly viable weather outside of Auroraville teams. The first would be an increase of Beartick's attack to base 60. This would keep it around where other Hail Sweepers reside currently without making it too over the top. Ice offensively is such a lethal typing that giving it speed to rival mons like Venusaur and Kingdra may be too much for a lot of teams offensively speaking. The other buff I'd like to give Beartick is a new secondary typing, in this case, the Fighting type. Beartick could now carve a niche as a Hail Sweeper that pressures Rock and Steel types, and Beartick also already has moves such as Superpower and Low Kick that take advantage of its new stab. I think these additions to Beartick would allow it to become an incredible offensive Pokemon on Hail teams and would give it a strong presence in Scarlet and Violet. Our number 6 Pokemon is our last weather Pokemon I'd like to buff for the moment, being Tropius. We've covered an option for Hail and Rain already, and Sand has so few options that are all passable already. So I'm going to shine some light on how we can make Tropius more desirable. Tropius already has a horrendous stat line, with its best stat being 99 HP. Both offenses are weak, the defensive stats and typing are unimpressive, and the speed is also terrible. The typing could be cool offensively, and has merits for Grass, as Flying is useful at defeating other Grass Pokemon as well as Bug types. So while some ROM hacks have taken a Grass Dragon approach to Tropius, I actually think we will just focus on its stats in today's video. I think the simplest way for Tropius to be useful and competitive would be making its offenses more viable. I think we should increase attack, special attack, and speed, all by 25 points each. This would still only give Tropius a 535 base stat total, which is around the high end for most starter Pokemon. It also not really approach any over-the-top territory either, since the new stats would be 93 attack, 97 special attack, and 76 speed. At first glance, this may seem unimpressive, but Tropius can actually do a lot with this. The special attack at first is okay, until you remember Tropius has solar power. Now, Tropius is now close in special attack behind Pokemon like Charizard and Heliolisk, instead of being behind about 30 points. Your physical attack is still useful as well, and both Dragon Dance and Chlorophyll sets should improve considerably from this. The only other thing I can think of would be giving Tropius Weather Ball and Acrobatics, since this gives Tropius both a strong coverage option, especially for steel types, as well as a better physical flying move than Aerial Ace. With these buffs in mind, Tropius is ready to take on Scarlet and Violet with huge success. Finally, we are away from weather Pokemon for a bit. Moving on to the top 5, we have a fan favorite among ghost types, Miss Magis. Miss Magis is a pretty strong ghost type stat-wise, but it's always been inferior to Pokemon such as Gengar because of things such as its dual typing and coverage being slightly better. Miss Magis has a good enough moveset, but when Miss Magius' best way to handle darks is Dazzling Gleam, why use that when Gengar can just use Focus Blast and do significantly more damage? Miss Magius had this problem when comparing it to a lot of other viable ghost Pokemon. But Gengar is by far the most open and shut comparison due to how similarly they can function. So what would make Miss Magius able to hold up to Gengar? Miss Magius has only a single typing at the moment, so let's start there. Miss Magius is a fairly deserving Pokemon of the Fairy typing, which would allow its Fairy type moves such as Dazzling Gleam to hold up a bit better to Gengar using Focus Blast, while also giving Miss Magius the ability to take neutral damage from Dark types now. I think this alone would be enough to make Miss Magius viable again. But since it's now a Fairy type, I think it's also right to give this Moonblast as well. Just because Togekiss couldn't be bothered to learn it outside of Pokemon Legends Arceus doesn't mean Miss Magius should have to share the same fate as well. With these additions, Miss Magius is ready to finally become one of the best ghost types competitively in Scarlet and Violet. Our number 4 Pokemon is our last weather Pokemon on our list today. Well, kinda. Let me rephrase. Our number 4 Pokemon is our last Pokemon that should have been a weather sweeper, Glaceon. Glaceon and Leafeon were introduced in Gen 4, with Leafeon having the abilities Leaf Guard and Chlorophyll. Meanwhile, Glaceon has Snow Cloak and Ice Body. While in Generation 4, Slush Rush didn't exist yet, why didn't Glaceon get its hidden ability changed to Slush Rush in Generation 7? Pokemon is not above changing hidden abilities after the fact. Just ask Chandelure about how it enjoys Shadow Tag. Not only this, but even Beartic was given Slush Rush in Generation 7. So why not Glaceon? Glaceon has been suffering in the depths of competitive Pokemon for generations. Even Flareon learned Flare Blitz in Gen 6. So giving evolutions a buff is a bit tricky since we can't change their stats or typing. Giving Glaceon Slush Rush over Ice Body is the easy part. But what else can we do to fix its issues? I think that simple thing would be giving Glaceon Earth Power. Glaceon could utilize a moveset with Earth Power, Blizzard, Ice Beam, and Shadow Ball in order to destroy opponents offensively with a Life Orb, Heavy Duty Boots, or Choice Specs. Glaceon's speed also puts it tied with our current fastest Hail Sweeper, Alolan Sandslash, while also being our first Hail Sweeper that's a special attacker. 130 special attack on a Slush Rush Pokemon will be spectacular for competitive. And if this also got Earth Power, I could even see it becoming a top tier VGC Pokemon as an offensive check to Landorus and Incineroar for Hail should they return. Giving these to Glaceon is truly long overdue, so I hope Scarlet and Violet delivers and finally gives Glaceon at least Slush Rush. Our number 3 Pokemon is one of our poison snakes, being Seviper. Seviper has a strong move pull and 2 strong abilities with Infiltrator and Shed Skin. The stats could be better, but since this is clearly meant to go alongside Zangoose, I'll ignore buffing the stats since we aren't buffing Zangoose today. Seviper really only needs a couple things though as a pure poison type to actually make it valuable: a recovery move and a secondary typing. With these, Seviper having a low speed stat and average bulk wouldn't matter as much, as Seviper would have some way to stay alive during a match and a strong second stab to pressure opponents with. Let's start with the secondary typing. I think we have a couple options that'd be both equally valuable, being ground or dark. Seviper already gets Earthquake and Crunch, so either actually would be strong here in order to give Seviper another stab option that'd be viable for it. I personally would value Dark over Ground, as this allows Seviper to gain a Psychic immunity. However, having a stab that pressures Steel types that are immune to Rock also has a lot of benefits. As for a recovery move that hits, I think we have two options that both work regardless of the typing you give Seviper. If we give it Dark, I think Moonlight would work fine to represent the darker themes of the night. If we give Seviper a ground typing, Shore Up would be an interesting option to represent the more earthy themes of the ground typing. With these buffs, Seviper is sure to become a strong Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Moving on to our number 2 Pokemon, we have none other than the fully evolved version of everyone's favorite mascot, Raichu. Raichu has actually gotten some love in Generation 7 with its Alolan form. So unlike most of our lists, this isn't out of the Pokemon Company neglecting these Pokemon, it's more due to how much love Pikachu gets. The fact that Raichu has to deal with Pikachu being so close to it in terms of usability is actually baffling, since all Pikachu needs to do is hold a light ball and it hits like a truck. Raichu, even with the Life Orb, does less damage than Pikachu does with a light ball, which is baffling to even think about. So how can we fix this? I think the biggest way to buff Raichu is to allow the light ball to work on Raichu as well, but that would be outright ban-worthy. Instead, why not give Raichu some more power? Giving Raichu a solid 110 in both attack stats would be a strong way to give Raichu the ability to outdamage Light Ball Pikachu. While the difference in damage would be slim, Raichu already has a decent speed advantage over Pikachu that is fairly important. Pikachu only has a base 90 speed. Meanwhile, Raichu's 110 speed is able to speed tie Pokemon such as Gengar and Latios. Raichu's move pool is already incredible thanks to all the Pikachu events, and its ability is also fairly useful as well. I think the buff to its offenses would allow Raichu to keep up with power creep from recent generations, while still being a far more reasonable buff than Light Ball working on Raichu as well in Scarlet and Violet. Now it's time for our number 1 Pokemon, which was done pretty dirty by nerfs in Gen 7. Our number 1 Pokemon most deserving of a buff in Scarlet and Violet is Talonflame. Talonflame got nerfed heavily in Generation 7, where Gale Wings only works at full health. Even if Pokemon didn't nerf this ability, it still is fairly weak offensively, especially when Generation 7 and 8 gave us not only ridiculously stronger offensive threats such as Dragapult and Rillaboom, but also better walls such as Toxapex. Talonflame has become the laughingstock of competitive Pokemon, one that used to soar above all other threats, and is now fallen from grace into the depths of NU. So how can we fix Talonflame? Well, I think restoring Gale Wings to its former glory may not actually be enough anymore. This would certainly make Talonflame viable again, but OU has a lot of other things that make it no longer a top threat. Several Pokemon, such as Slowbro, Landorus T, and Toxapex to name a few, all run Rocky Helmet, and would switch into Talonflame with ease, causing it to faint quickly. On top of this as well, Talonflame also has to worry about common OU threats such as Zapdos that make Talonflame risk being paralyzed of static, or Tapu Koko that resists flying attacks while also outpacing Talonflame's fire attacks. I think Talonflame, with its old Gale Wings, alongside a buff to its offenses, could be valuable. I think if we gave Talonflame 10 in each of its attack stats would be pretty valuable in order to give Talonflame options, whether a special or physical set would be better. In singles, heavy-duty boots in exchange for the damage choice span provided would allow the ability to avoid hazards from KOing it after a single attack. So I don't want to go too overboard buffing its offenses, even if it'll be noticeably weaker when it isn't running a Choice Band or Sharp Beak. Regardless though, I hope Talonflame gets a buff more than any other Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. That's my list of Pokemon that I feel deserve buffs in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Whether you agree or disagree with my list, make sure to let me know in the comments below, as I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Also, if you made it this far, leave a like on the vid and use the subscribe button to stay up to date for more Pokemon Scarlet and Violet content. Hey, it's the outro. Isn't that exciting? Thank you for enjoying another Mystic Umbreon video. We're getting ready to enter the fall, and the final stretch of hype for Scarlet and Violet is here. The excitement for Pokemon's 9th generation is at its peak, and I couldn't be more excited. We've still got plenty to cover before then though, so keep yourselves locked in. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and Mystic Umbreon Shorts channel. If we get the 10K followers on TikTok, and we're super close, I'll be doing a viewer's choice video. Also, if you're into fanfictions and what ifs, check out Mystic Reads. I offer a ton of creative spoken word content on there, so come and join me. That's all for now. Make sure you subscribe for more fantastic content, and I'll see you next time.